Okay, good evening, everybody. Good evening, members. Good evening, officers, and good evening to everybody watching, whether you're in the room or online. My name is Councillor Kate Salmon, and this is our meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Board, specifically to look at the budget for 2026-27. First of all, I will hand over to the Democratic Services Officer to give out the housekeeping notices, and if I could ask Claire for you also to do the apologies and substitute members at the same time, that would be great. Thank you.
Of course, thanks, Chair. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point in the car park at the front of the building. Finally, please could everyone ensure that background noise is kept to a minimum and that mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on laptops. Thank you. Sorry, we've received apologies for this meeting from Councillor Tony Trent, and Councillor Michael Tarling is substituting.
Thank you very much. So then we dealt with items 1 and 2 from our agenda, so we'll move on to item 3, which is declarations of interest. So do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interests or any other interests to declare on any items on the agenda, please? I'm not seeing any indications. If anything does occur to you as we go through the agenda, please just let me know. Thank you. Moving on then to item 4, which is confirmation of the minutes of our previous meeting, the meeting held on the 5th of January. Do I have consensus for those as a correct record of the meeting? Any dissent? No, thank you very much. Item 5 is our recommendation tracker. And we have, this is an item for information, but we have got the portfolio holders present to provide us with responses on recommendations that were made at the October meeting. So if I could ask Councillor Andy Martin, first of all, to give a response on item number 57, I think it is, from the recommendation tracker. Martin.
Okay, thank you. I'll be very brief because I know you've got quite a big item coming up. Can I also just apologise for my rather casual wear? Everybody's looking very smart. I didn't intend to actually be here. I was going to be online, so I didn't get a chance to go home, so apologies.
No problem.
There's a couple of things I wanted to mention. So I think one of the issues raised by the committee was about staffing hours and the introduction of, or the potential introduction of, open access technology which might result in a reduction in staffing hours. And I wanted to just reassure the committee that that was never the intention and is not the intention at all. Clearly, the open access technology project, and I think we're still waiting to hear from Arts Council England as our bid, is purely about having our libraries open longer. It's not a replacement for library staff, and I think you'll have heard me say previously that we have salami sliced the library staff over not just in the last 3 years, but for a long time, and that is no longer sustainable. We're at the point where we cannot be doing that anymore. So I feel personally very passionate about that, and I'm giving you an assurance that that is not. If anybody felt that was an excuse to do that, it certainly isn't. So there might be a bit of tweaking around if we're looking at opening sort of 6 days a week, and clearly there's some tweaking to be done, but that's not an excuse or an opportunity or a cover, shall we say, for the hours. I think you also asked about SIL projects.
Yeah.
So I've got a list. I don't know whether you want me to just go through it very briefly, but there's a list of applications that have been made for SIL funding for library projects.
If you'd like to tell us what's going through. the recommendation was around the library service putting together a list
Yes.
and maintaining that list so that bids
Yeah.
could be put forward.
Yeah.
you
So
know,
we do. So there is a rolling list, a running list, which has been put together, and I can just. I mean, there aren't that many things on there, so I'll just mention. And I think Linda, who is online, may correct me on this, but I think these are amounts that have been applied for the next SIL funding round, which I think closes in March, I think, or April. So what's been applied for at the minute is some SIL funding of £6,000 for Bournemouth Library for the replacement of newspaper microfilm reader. Camper Cliffs Library have applied for some money for the improvements of the children's area. Tutton Library for the replacement of chairs. West Howe Library for adding baby changing facilities. Branksome Library for improvements of the children's area. Charminster, which obviously members will be aware that it is currently closed, and Matty's here if you want to dig into that a little bit further as to where we are with that. But their application was for more comfortable reading and rhyme time facilities. Westbourne Library, so my colleague to my left will be pleased to hear that one. Improvement again of the children's area, and Winton Library the same. And I just had a personal note that the Highcliffe Library has applied to the Parish Council, Highcliffe Morford Parish Council, of which I sit, for £6,000 to replace the decking at the back of Highcliffe Library. We're actually looking at giving that as a grant rather than SIL, but it's still a significant amount of money. So that's the item about the SIL projects, and that list is obviously ongoing. Yes, was there anything else, or was that
No,
it?
thank you, Councillor Martin. That's helpful. It's really helpful to hear that obviously that SIL is being applied for by different libraries, and I think the point that was made back in the October meeting was around the library service proactively maintaining a list,
Yes.
so that ward councillors could, maybe it would be shared with ward councillors, maybe, so that ward councillors could easily identify, oh, my library needs something, which might just facilitate that process being more readily, I can't think of the word,
Accessible.
Yeah, every time that
Like
a
the
fill round
libraries.
is open, yeah, rather than being reliant on, I don't know, the willingness of individuals concerned, perhaps.
Sure. Yeah, and that list is being maintained, and I know Linda will be listening. And if we need to do more to make people aware of it, then I'm sure we'll do that.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you very much for the
That's
update.
okay.
And I think we will move on then, because as you say, we have got a lot to do tonight. So we have now also a response from Councillor Cox on another recommendation that we put forward in October, which was around the budget setting process. So Councillor Cox, if I may pass over to you. You look slightly puzzled.
Yes, sorry,
Okay.
I'm completely honestly unprepared.
So we had an MTFP update at the October meeting, and as part of that, we recommended to Cabinet that as part of the budget setting process, consideration be given to utilising receipts from the existing surplus asset disposal programme 26-27 to address some of the repairs and maintenance of publicly facing assets. It's very linked to libraries because it did come out of a discussion specifically around the libraries and the libraries estate. And my notes tell me that you were going to give a response to that.
Thank you for the reminder. And yes, we did consider it as part of the budget process, but we haven't followed through with that recommendation.
And I have seen that in the budget report that there is a little bit of commentary on that. Is there anything else that you might be able to tell us about the process that went on there in terms of why that wasn't taken forward?
Well, simply there were too many other demands for the resources of the council. As you will shortly find out, we're in a very precarious situation, and we don't have the spare funds to spend extra on libraries where we have it. If we can, that would be great. If we have the resources, but we haven't. So that was the conclusion we came to.
Okay, thank you. I think it's something we might return to in the budget report, as it is mentioned in there as well. Thank you very much. We will move on then to item 6, which is public issues. I understand that there are no public issues at tonight's meeting, is that correct? Okay, in which case we move straight on then to item 7, which is our main item on the agenda tonight. So this is scrutiny of the 2026-2027 budget paper that was released to us on Monday. And I'm just going to remind you about the approach that we agreed as board. We talked about how best we could, where we could most have an impact and how best we could engage with this as an overview and scrutiny function. And we agreed that we would focus on the proposed savings that are outlined in the budget. And to that end, we have invited the directors of all the parts of the council to come along tonight and to talk to us specifically about those savings, which are, I think it's Appendix 5A in the savings schedule of that budget report. So we are going to start there with, and we're going to ask each of the directors or the heads of service to talk us through the savings that are outlined there. And specifically, our focus was on the impact on residents, and we asked the directors to speak to what impacts they anticipate these savings having in terms of people who live, work, study, visit BCP, what that actually is going to mean for people here. So I'm going to hand over then. I haven't got a specific order, but I will let the officers decide for themselves. Who is going? First on my list is Laura Ambler. May I come to you first, Laura?
Yes.
Okay. So Laura Ambler is our Corporate Director for Wellbeing. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Chair. Corporate Director for Wellbeing. So within the Directorate, as you all know, we have Public Health and Communities, Housing and Public Protection, Adult Social Care and Commissioning. So I'll run through each of those in turn, if I may. So if I start with Public Health and Communities, I think the headline there, you'll see that the budget clearly is challenged but manageable. We do not foresee any direct reduction to current service provision. There are 3 items on that saving schedule. Hopefully they are relatively self-explanatory, but the Ward Improvement Fund was removed in the 25-26 budget setting. An allocation was retained to allow an officer to conclude the implementation of that programme. So we see no direct impact from that. The other allowances in there are around increased fees and charges in future years of things like, for example, the community centre, generating additional income. And there is also an additional contribution from the public health grant to corporate overheads. That would be around 140,000. So that does reduce the amount of spend on protecting the public health of BCP residents, but we don't see, as I said, any direct reduction to current service provision. So that covers off public health and communities. I'll go through each in turn, and I'm sure, Chair, you may come back with queries. I'm going to turn to adult social care and commissioning next, if I may. So I think in adult social care, what we see is a picture of increasing demand, and we have current in-year budget pressures as a result of that demand, and we're seeing complexity and acuity in particular in driving that level of demand. I would say there has been significant working, particularly across system partners, and we have some fundamental transformation programmes that are in place, which we see as being critical to delivering this budget. So things like Fulfilled Lives, Future Care, and of course the prevention strategy. And the purpose of those strategies and approaches is really to be focusing on prevention, so that we obviously minimise any impacts to our residents, our communities that may require care, obviously their carers and indeed our staff. But I think it's fair to say that obviously that is a very challenged position, and one that we will need to work very closely with partners to make sure that we deliver. But we have assurances that with those programmes in place, that is deliverable. And again, we're confident that recognising the challenges, all staff functions and services will be maintained. And if I move then to commissioning as part of adult social care, again, significantly challenged. The key challenges that you'll see there are things around inflation, workforce costs, and again, demand and volume. So the watch outs for us are making sure that we support providers, particularly the smaller ones, and that we keep managing and maintaining our market and the strategic commissioning cycle. But again, whilst that budget is extremely tight and challenging, we're assured that that would be deliverable. And so finally, if I may, onto housing. Again, housing and public protection budgets are significantly challenged. Again, a picture of increasing demand, particularly, for example, around things like homelessness, bed and breakfast accommodation, temporary accommodation. We are sustaining reduced levels, but I think we all know that that is a very challenged position. Savings in particular will come from additional income generation and service efficiency across our directorate. But I think that does mean that the strain on those services is at capacity. And I think as we heard earlier around libraries, again, future years, it will be extremely challenging to see any further savings that can be achieved there. So the other point I would just like to make on this portfolio is around recognising that while some of those services are non-statutory, they are obviously critical, particularly in terms of wellbeing and protection. So again, just recognising that, and of course the choices that we have looked at and have been put forward here are indeed looking to minimise any impact on our residents and communities. So I hope, Chair, that gives you a flavour of what's in there, and obviously we're happy to answer any questions. I've got officers in the room as well that can help.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
I will, after each of the directors has given us their presentation, I will offer the board an opportunity to ask some questions as we go through, if that's okay. So I'll open out to the board to have any questions on that area from Laura.
I have a question.
Councillor Aikenhead.
Yes. Are there any of those areas where you feel there is a particular risk that there may be impact to the service that residents would notice?
I think, as I was saying, particularly around things like adult social care, it is an extremely challenged position, and indeed in terms of housing. So I think our focus is on maintaining service delivery and quality in particular. So those transformation programmes that we've got across adult social care are going to be critical. Working with partners is going to be critical because not all of that is within our gift. But again, I think everything that we've been looking at and the measures that we've got in place are indeed to mitigate any impact on residents and communities. So we should be seeing maintaining the service levels. And indeed, in some areas, what we're actually seeing is that quality is improving, but that's sort of in spite of. So it's a very challenging picture and one that we'll keep working hard with the teams to keep delivering on.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? I'd like to just...
Councillor
Councillor Beasley, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a quick question, really requesting, if you like, a bit more of an explanation in terms of adult social care, the statutory responsibilities and those that are not statutory, and how close to the elimination of non-statutory we are, and you touched on the implications of that. I think we'd like to hear a little bit more about how that balance works, because the statutory part, fine, as long as we're delivering that in the most efficient way. So that's my question there. And the non-statutory, as to why the council should be doing it and what the benefits are for where it is still performing those non-statutory services.
Yeah, so I think across the directorate, to be clear, what we're saying is maintaining those statutory functions. So hopefully that answers that and providing that reassurance. So everything that we are required to do under the Health and Social Care Act, adult social care, for example, we would continue to do. The same in terms of housing. When we come to the non-statutory services, what we describe there are some of the services that are absolutely critical. So things like safety and public protection. They may not have a statutory requirement, but as we know, the implications, if we were not to continue to do those, would have a direct impact on our residents and our communities, and indeed could start to impact actually on our ability to deliver some of those stat services. I don't know if it's helpful to bring examples into the room. It might be that I call on colleagues to help with delivering an example, if that would be helpful.
Chair, I think it would be, because adult social care is such a big spend for the council, and I think members probably would benefit from understanding a little bit more depth to that.
Yeah, sorry, when I was thinking of an example, I was actually thinking around housing, actually, and I was just looking at our Director of Housing, who is just sat behind you, if I may, just because I think some of the non-statutory services, it's probably helpful to explain some of those in that context. Kelly, would you mind? Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Kelly Dean. I'm Director of Housing and Public Protection. I think certainly from a housing and public protection perspective, and actually Councillor Beasley, I think you're well aware from a public protection perspective in particular, there does come a point where actually when you're working to a sort of statutory minimum, sort of statutory maximum actually, you are, there's a limit to the work that you can do that is really proactive. And that can be challenging. That can drive some demand into some of our statutory areas, and that does have an impact in terms of some of the quality of our environment. And we do work hard to try to prioritise. We have to really carefully prioritise our resources in that sort of area. In terms of homelessness, the absolute priority, and it does impact on things like adult social care. If you take things like hospital discharge, there's work there that happens in a non-statutory space that is around support and identification of, a lot of accommodation that is provided for people who are coming out of that sort of setting. And frankly, we need so much more of it. There are elements that are strictly speaking non-statutory, but actually save us an awful lot in terms of the expenditure around statutory services, not just from an adult social care perspective, but of course from homelessness as well. So there are a number of different service areas that we've been really careful to thoroughly examine and consider in that space in terms of the proposals that have been made. So I guess that the message is, there's some very real constraints within our service areas, and we do work across wellbeing to consider how we can stretch the benefit of all of our budgets and our approaches, and that cross-system working to make sure that we're tackling the prevention, early intervention, and that we're protecting non-statutory services that would have an impact on statutory drivers. It is a risk though, and it is quite tricky.
Thank you.
Councillor Brown's indicating.
I just wanted to just to come in a bit on the query about adult social care and the non-statutory side. There's not a lot within the budget that's non-statutory, to be honest. The vast majority of adult social care is statutory services. Small parts are technically non-statutory. I would just give an example of something that's sort of non-statutory. The BCP handyman service, for example. We run a few crew members and vehicles and that going out doing free repairs in people's homes and helping them look after their properties and keep them well maintained, that sort of thing. And for those that are eligible, so if you're aged over 60, have a disability, long-term condition, and you're in receipt of certain government benefits, then you can get that free service. The labour is free, you have to pay for parts, that sort of thing. And you may say, well, why is the council providing those sorts of free services? It's very much like on the housing side, that actually it's non-statutory, but it's worth its weight in gold in terms of supporting the statutory services. And we've had feedback from people saying, if I didn't have a trustworthy person that I know coming out to do these things to help me maintain my home, my family have said they'd probably have to send me to a residential care home. And we know that that's a core part of our adult social care prevention strategy, is actually we're providing these technically non-statutory services, but it's helping us keep the pressure off of the statutory services. If we stop those, we just end up spending even more, and it's actually works for the individuals and the residents because they want to maintain their independence. They want to be able to stay in their own home. They don't really necessarily want to go into a care setting, and by doing this sort of thing, we actually help them live their lives the way they want to, but actually it helps them and it saves the council money. So that's just an example of a non-statutory service that we're providing. And there's quite a few within our sort of prevention strategy like that, in terms of supporting stronger communities so that people have much better support within their own local communities. Technically non-statutory, but worth its weight in gold in terms of taking pressure off of the statutory adult social care services.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Earl.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come in on that question as well, because I think that's really important. And I just want to reflect, this feels like a very odd scrutiny session to me, because we've got officers kind of presenting our budget. And for an example of that, of something that we've been really clear about protecting and as part of our budget, is things like our community services. So having those neighbourhood teams, having individual community officers in our most deprived communities. Now, if we go back a few years ago, I think it was the 2023 budget, when that service got chopped really far down, and we've kind of made the commitment to keep that it's around 250,000 in our budget to sustain the communities team. Now, for me, that is a political choice that we've made. It could be that someone else, an alternative budget might not want to make that. And I think it's great that we've got officers here who know their briefs, who know their areas, but I'm confused as to whether we're scrutinising the decision or just scrutinising like the impact. So I'm very happy to be here, and obviously we've got cabinet members as well. Yeah, we could just have some clarity of how we see the scrutiny session going.
Yep, certainly, Councillor Earl. Apologies if it wasn't clear. This was agreed a while back when we talked about how we would look at the budget scrutiny, and as I said, this is we agreed that we would focus on the savings that were included in the budget, and we would ask the directors to come and speak about the specific proposals that are in there within their own areas, which is the part that we're doing now. That isn't to say that we aren't then going to open up and have a presentation from Councillor Cox and Adam to talk about the budget as a whole, but the focus that we wanted to have was on that resident impact, because that's as a scrutiny board, that's our agreed lens, that we keep in mind always what the impact of all the things that we're doing as a local authority has on our residents. And so that's why we've taken the format that we have. So far it feels as though it's working okay, that people are coming in and speaking to elements where they can, where they want to, and the directors were all briefed as to what we were going to ask from them. So hopefully it shouldn't be too problematic. Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to ask one thing, if I may, on the savings. It was just around the top two. Have you got the list of the same thing that we're looking at, the Appendix 5B? The top two lines around additional income from client contributions. I just wanted to understand a bit more what that means in terms of, is that asking people who pay towards services that we offer to pay more? Is it asking different people to start paying for things that they haven't been paying for before? Just for me to sort of understand what those lines mean a little bit more, if that's possible.
So my understanding of those lines is that it's additional people that would qualify where appropriate to be making contributions, not that we're asking them to pay more. So we have seen in the budget, and certainly that has been profiled through this year, that we have seen that there has been an increasing additional income from client contributions, not that we are charging individuals more.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. Thanks. I think then we will move on. Thank you so much, Laura, for that. Unless there's any final questions on that section. Within that schedule of savings that we have in front of us, I think the next area is children's. So I think we have two heads of service here to talk to us from children's, because Cathy Hadley has given her apologies. Is that right? Councillor Cox, you
Can I
wanted
just
to say
clarify
something?
that last point? I think a significant amount of that extra, on those efficiencies, those fees and charges, are to do with inflationary increases. So it's not just additional people, it's inflationary increases on what we're already charging.
Thank you. So, hello, I think we have with us Lisa Lynn Scott, who's the Director of Education Skills, and Juliet Blake, the Director of Children's Social Care. So thank you both for being here with us. And if I may pass over to you to do a similar, talking us through that saving schedule from your directorate, so that we can understand that resident impact, which is our focus. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to go first, Juliet. Okay. Obviously there's been some potentially good news in the press release today in relation to the high needs block deficit, but that doesn't change the fact that we still need to make sure that we're taking that, as you've just heard, in terms of adult social care and housing, that prevention and early intervention approach that will align with the incoming SEND reform when that lands, and that means supporting children and young people at an earlier stage and therefore reducing the need for more costly statutory services. So that will be a really key part of that high needs block management approach that we take. And in terms of aligning with SEND reforms, obviously that's early, local, fair, effective and shared. And that approach impacts positively on home to school transport if we get that right, because our children will be attending our local provisions, and we'll also have fewer children over time needing that higher level of support and more being able to attend their local mainstream setting. And that's very much the approach that will come through in the SEND reforms and that we will want to deliver on. So that's the first thing, I think, is a large scale thing that I wanted to say to everybody. In terms of the list that you have in front of you in particular, reducing budget against post in education in some form that's being, we're more effectively utilising grant funding that we have to be able to then reduce the pressure on the centralised budget. And we are, I'm sorry, I'm just scanning down which ones are education. We're realigning those, some of those posts and some of the costs of those posts into grant funding. And we continue to look at where we can work more efficiently, but as you've heard already, reducing down to statutory service only would actually create a cost pressure. So it's really important that we make sure that our services are working really hard to be able to deliver that early support. I think, Juliet, the others may be yours, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of children's social care, it continues to be an area of high demand, and nationally there's been an increase of 7% in terms of children in care. We know that we're still higher than that national average, and we're working hard to bring that down. So in terms of this, some of the areas for savings, we're currently bringing in alternatively qualified practitioners, and they will take up positions that currently agency qualified social workers are in. That's part of our government's initiative called Families First. So that will be slightly different in terms of how we deliver our own services. So the money is tight. We're making the best use of the money that we can. We're also working with colleagues across the council. So with housing in particular, around our 18-year-olds plus, to make sure that they're in the right place in terms of housing and accommodation. And in terms of unaccompanied asylum seekers, we are ensuring that they are getting the benefits they're entitled to once they get leave to remain in the UK. So that will bring down costs for ourselves and already see some costs coming down. In terms of early help, that continues to work really well, and we've extended some of the provision that we do there through the Best Start Family Hub. So that will continue to provide a service. If you know anything about the research behind that, the service through early help costs about a third of the cost of what it would cost if it ends up in a statutory setting. So that's a considerable savings for us. So there's lots of things we're working on around that. We've also got a reunification team. They've brought just over £900,000 savings. They've been in place for about a year. So, but in terms of the cost, they keep going up in terms of the numbers and the demand out there, particularly around neglect for ourselves and nationally. The other things in terms of the savings which are on the list, we have benefits which I've mentioned, travel claims. So we've taken a decision to make sure that non-employees of BCP are not given the same travel amount as employees of BCP, so that we're not paying for that, the maintenance of cars, etc., in order to make the journeys that are necessary. We've also looked at the vacancies, as I've discussed, so it's been really, really hard to recruit into vacancies at the moment. That's partly due to change in legislation around agency social workers. So there's less availability, and a decision by many agency social workers to work closer to home, because each area has put a cap on in terms of how much we can pay agency workers now. So that has brought money down in terms of what we spend in that area. We've looked at reducing, we have looked at whether or not we can relocate our MASH team. Now, the MASH is a multi-agency safeguarding hub. So it's ourselves, it's health, and it's police where we sit together so we can make real decisions around welfare and protecting children and what needs to happen next. At the moment, we sit in a police station, however, we pay to do that, and it's quite costly. So we're looking at whether or not we can do that in a different building. We're looking between health, police and ourselves at where that may be possible in order for that to happen. Other things, translation fees, we have done really close work with IT colleagues, and that is now provided through AI. So a lot of those savings are coming. I think we saved in the first 6 months of that, we saved about £24,000. So that's considerable, where we can use IT to help us rather than having to pay for people to translate on our behalf. I'm trying to see what else to pull out on this. Commissioning wise, we've been working with our providers, and we've increased the number of provision providers who are working with ourselves, but we've also increased the amount of accommodation that we have for our young people, and that again will bring some savings, because a lot of the time, because there's a shortage nationally of foster care and other placements, we end up having our costs elevated beyond inflation. So again, the more work we can do with providers locally to build those relationships, the better in terms of BCP itself. And hopefully it enables more children to stay in BCP rather than having to go further away, which unfortunately tends to happen if there's really complex needs, because we don't have the facilities to meet the needs locally. I think that's about it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's really helpful and very clearly set out. So I'll open up to members again for questions on this, on the children's area from the savings.
I have one if there's no one else.
Go ahead, Councillor Aikenhead.
Actually, it's two, but I'll ask them both together because they're quite similar. It's just really wanting to understand what some of the items here mean. So the first one is reallocation from other funding streams. Just wanted an explanation of what that is and how, is it really a service reduction, or is it just things moving from one place to another? And the other one was non-statutory service, SIT. Just wondered what that actually stands for and what it is.
So I believe that is supported internships, and what we've done, so it is a movement rather than a reduction, because actually it's really important that we grow our supported internship offer. But we do have some grant funding that we receive for the delivery of that. And we are utilising more for that than we were previously, so that then reduces the pressure on the centralised budget.
Okay. Is that both? Is that answering both questions? The other one was about a bit further down. It says non-statutory service SIT. Is that related?
I think that's what she was referring to.
Or was that the first one?
I believe it is, yes.
And the top one was the reallocation from other funding streams. That was also the same. Was that something different?
So the reference on the side of the table is CS5, if that helps.
So in terms of the non-statutory service, the supported internships, that is the reallocation of a small amount of grant funding to that work. And then the other reallocation is a wider piece across a range across both areas.
So it's basic. Are you saying it's basically because you've got grant funding for it? There's not actually going to be a service reduction. You're just getting the money from somewhere else.
That's correct.
That's excellent. Just what I like to hear.
Yeah. Councillor Burton. Want to come in?
Yeah, if you'd like me to add to the thing to that, because I think it all goes with the discussion with the statutory and non-statutory area. It's very easy in both adults and children's services to say, okay, you know, when we're in situations like we are now, that the easy thing to do is take away everything that's non-statutory. But we can see, of course, that makes a lot more expense further down the line. Now, I say expense because, of course, this meeting is talking about the budget. But of course, the knock-on is that, of course, if you do the non-statutory stuff, not only does it save money down the line, it also makes people's lives better because you don't get to that point. Now, there are some bits which are non-statutory that there's had to be some moving around to enable the service to still achieve doing them. The grant was one of them. The grants have been combined. Therefore, there's been a sort of small amount of wiggle room in there to allow some of the non-statutory stuff to continue without, so it comes out of the non-statutory stuff as a budget, but it still can continue by being funded slightly differently, if that helps.
Yes, thank you. That's very helpful. Are there other questions from board? Councillor Northover.
Could I just have an explanation about what the transferring the care leavers hub into locality working model means, please?
At the moment, we're looking at moving into new service delivery, which allows us to base ourselves within communities and locally. So there was a cabinet report probably 2 years ago, I think, which agreed to about dividing children's services into 2 localities, an east and a west. So we're currently looking at how we would deliver. So what we know is that our care experienced young people, some of them will access 333, which is a local hub, others won't. If you're living over, say, in Poole direction, to come all the way to Bournemouth to access that is quite a trip. So what we're trying to look at is how can we provide a service that will allow east and west both to have access. So if anything, it will increase that ability for our young people to access it, not reduce.
So how is the cost saving there?
That depends where we end up putting it. So at the moment we have 2 youth access hubs. So whether or not that's an opportunity that we could use those 2 for our care experience, at the moment we're still considering where we could look at locating that. So we have an east and a west.
Thank you. Councillor Beasley.
Thank you very much. I've got 3 questions around children's. In part, similar to my questions to do with adult social care, I was trying to tease out a better understanding between that statutory and non-statutory provision for the benefit of everybody. And I think that is helpful because I think there is probably not as much understanding as there needs to be quite often. So in terms of what we've had explained to us about CS 10 and 11 to start with, if I may. So CS 10 is the Children's Agency staff budget reduction. I got some of that, but I think we ought to hear a bit more about it. It's £500,000, and it will be about the delivery of that or the non-delivery of that. So what risk there is in there, and may we exceed that? Who knows? The same is true to a certain extent on CS 11, which is children's commissioning savings, and I have never fully understood how that mechanism works, and that's over a very long period of time, in the sense that this is overall a budget which we've got a lot of focus on at the moment, and I assume that commissioning is a major part of the potential for savings, and whilst understanding the competition there is out there in terms of service providers, I think I'd like a bit more reassurance around that part of it, because to me, £200,000 at this stage in the game doesn't seem as much as I might have expected. And then if I could come on to home to school transport after that.
Okay, I think those two are for Juliet, aren't they? So yeah, I'll let Juliet answer.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the agency reductions, that is partly down to this Family First programme. So the legislation and the statutory guidance has changed along the lines of alternatively qualified practitioners. So that in itself will bring savings in terms of we can reduce the number of agency social workers we need to have. The other reason for the reduction was we had an increase in terms of the amount of permanent staff. Therefore, in terms of the use of agency, it wasn't so demanding as it had been in the past. So there's two elements to that. The advantage of our alternatively qualified, if you look at any research behind that, they tend to stay longer. So the lifespan of social workers in any frontline service, usually it's around 2 years. Alternatively qualified, it's much longer. So I'd say they're probably going to commit here for the majority of their career, is what I'd say. So that will bring savings in itself. And if you bear in mind, some of the money put aside for agency was probably as a result of the journey that Children's Services had been on. We only became good in January 2025. And of course, the landscape before then was quite different to where we are currently.
Thank you.
Second half of the questions is around commissioning savings. I think some of this commissioning savings is due to being more effective and efficient at how we're doing things. So being able to recruit, being able to liaise with providers outside and make sure that we have created that system that we can rely on providers to give us what it is we're seeking at the best possible price we can get it. I think that's really increased. And there's more efficiencies in terms of how that system's being run. So again, remember the journey we've been on, where we came from and where we're getting to. It sort of shows the changes within there. So we still have inflationary increases in terms of cost, but in terms of how we're delivering, it's quite different. So moving, for instance, our adults into the right part of the system enables more space for younger children to move into more affordable accommodation. Is probably the easiest way to say it. And if we can bring children closer to BCP, that also saves in terms of the travel costs and the expense of having to pay, say, for families to see their children further away, or to provide a building or room to have that contact of care. So all of those things together will reduce the overall cost.
Thank you. Councillor Beasley, did you want to come back?
Well, could I just have a further question on that, and then I'll go to home to school. I just was really asking the question, is £200,000 ambitious enough? Because I've never understood, as I said earlier, how it is that we can't actually get much more into that budget, given how large a part of the council's activity it is in children's, and the issues that we're facing financially as an authority. And I just wondered whether that is ambitious enough, and whether the plan is to be more ambitious about it, even if that means almost investing to save as a result.
Okay, is that okay, Juliet?
Well, I'll give it my best. In terms of that, I think there's a real challenge here because we have increase in demand. So even though it says £200,000 savings, if you allow for that inflationary increase, if you allow for the extra demand that's currently in the system, it's really difficult to bring those costs down and to make further savings when actually demand and cost increases. So I think there's a bit of a balance between the two, and maybe the money doesn't show the amount of savings that actually are being made. So if you think about, I mentioned reunification, that's a £900,000 saving, but on paper you won't see it. If you look at our budget, you will not see that saving. But we know it's happened. So without those initiatives in place, the cost would be far greater. And we also have try and get off the top of my head now. It takes a family, which is how we're working with our foster carers to create like a family unit. So when foster carers need time, need respite, there's other people within that network who help deliver that. So it helps stop placement breakdowns, which again then saves money. And that's around £800,000 savings. So when you add it together, there is money. It's just, can you see it overall when the demand continues to go up and when the cost continues to go up? And that's the difficult balance in terms to trying to show the savings.
Thank you. It's really helpful.
Can I just
Lisa?
Can I just come in with just some things that might help add to that picture as well? So from a commissioning perspective, in terms of use of in-house foster carers, which is obviously a better model for us, we're working above the national average of 70%. We're working at 74% in terms of that placement occupancy. So we're already in a really positive position in terms of the use of in-house foster carers. And we're really growing our use of kinship care as well. So 35% of our children are placed in-house living with kinship carers. And so in terms of saying, is it ambitious enough? We're already working at a really good level and still only looking at that 200,000. So I think it would be really difficult at this point for us to project anything higher than that.
Thank you. Councillor Beasley, I think you had another question about home to school transport.
I did, yes. So home to school transport at CST S3. And I heard the explanation earlier on about local schools, and obviously that then helps that issue. Was that explanation about the whole of that saving in the budget, which is down at 576,000 for next year, rising to just over 2 million the following year, and slightly less, or down to 500,000 the year after that? And I just think for amounts of that significance, could we have perhaps a little bit more explanation around the background and how that's going to work in practice? How confident can we be that those savings can be delivered in the timings that are on the schedule?
Thank you. So that comes from the paper which has been approved. We did have an external review of the home to school transport service with recommendations about how that service could be transformed for the betterment of children and young people's travel experience and movement towards more independence as children and young people, but also in terms of what savings that could make. And so having received approval through the council mechanisms, we're now at the point where we're able to commission a provider to deliver on those improvements and that transformation, and that's where those savings will be realised. And we are hopeful that is a true representation of savings, and that it will be at least that much. And in terms of the how, again, that was laid out in the paper that was approved, but broadly speaking, that's about route optimization and good effective route optimization that happens as a regular piece of work, which obviously comes with data and IT transformation. It's about making sure that our policies are up to date and in line with national, but also good practice elsewhere in terms of where we're charging and not charging, and building an independent travel training program, because at the moment we don't have one of those. So we think that's a really important part of the development that we put in place. And then obviously it's also about those about aspects like how we go about the commissioning of the travel assistance and those that support those young people on their journeys to and from school. So it's got a number of different elements to it, laid out in that paper, which will then be delivered over the coming year.
Okay. Yes, I think I had Councillor Northover, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Tarling, okay?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about the translation reduction. Could you explain how much of the translation budget that is a cut of, and is it just documents that are going to be used translated with AI, or is it in meetings? And what sort of testing have you done to make sure it's accurate as well?
Thanks, Chair. In terms of I think we're spending, and off the top of my head, it's about £60,000 on translation. What we can't use it for is things, for instance, in front of a court and legal documents. They still have to be translated fully. The IT service, I don't think we've got anyone here from IT, but they have done the testing and made sure that it's efficient. Ah, fantastic. Sarah's on screen. So, so Sarah, I don't know if you want to comment, Sarah, on it, but there has been testing from IT and in terms of the service itself. So,
yeah, absolutely. Hi there. So I'm Sarah Chamberlain, Director of IT and Programmes. So yes, this is one of our instances of AI use cases that we have brought into the organisation. We've set up an initial governance process, so all of these instances are signed off by Corporate Management Board, and we follow the AI use case through. So as Juliet said, it's all tested. We absolutely work with the part of the organisation to make sure they're progressing effectively. At the moment, we're just doing it in this children's area, but my team are working really hard to sort of learn the methodology, and you'll see actually within the IT and programme savings outline, we're projecting further savings as we use this learning to move it across the rest of the organisation where we find the opportunities.
Thank you, Sarah.
Can I come back?
Yes, Councillor Northover, please.
So could you explain how it's used? Is it used, for instance, in meetings with a young person? Is that the sort of scenario? And when you say you've tested it, have you tested it with a translator being there to make sure it's accurate? And
yes, I mean, sorry.
Oh, I just wondered if you found out if people are actually happy and find it a useful way of communicating as well, because if there's an impact on, for instance, foster carers, they might find their experience of foster caring very, very difficult. So then you could have an impact on them.
Absolutely, hence why we're piloting it in a small area at the moment, and we then spend time going back and reviewing to make sure it is appropriate. And at any stage, if it isn't, then we stop that particular piece of work. But as we said, it's successfully achieving these financial savings because it is working in those instances. We're actually about 130 interactions at the moment across the service, and it's where our business support team are utilising that to support those pieces of work that are currently taken out or carried out by third parties.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, apologies, Chair. It's more just point of order and an agenda here. I'm a substitute member, and I literally was substituted in at lunchtime today, so I've literally had a very fast skip read through this afternoon. I hadn't appreciated we're doing it, and Councillor Waits just told me that this is the method we were going to do the budget scrutiny as a bottom-up approach. Can I just ask that I'm really struggling to follow some of the questions that are being asked by other members here, that if they're referencing a part of the report, that they just say, I'm on page such and such of the report, because I've been skipping through this and not following the thread at all here.
Councillor Tarling, absolutely. We are on page 103, and we have been for the whole of item 7 so far?
Yes, I've got there now, but it's taken me the whole of the meeting to follow this. And if I'm struggling, then members of the public who are maybe have the report in front of them will be, I'm sure, equally as confused.
I think I did say twice that it was Appendix 5B of the papers. So
apologies, I missed that. But I as I said, when people are referencing a term, if I could just ask that they say, you know, like, as somebody said, CS5, then they do that each time. That'd be quite useful. Thank you.
yeah, thank you. We'll bear that in mind. Thank you. Were there any further questions on the Children's Directorate section, or shall we move on? I think that we will move on. We have then next on that same page of the reports, moving on to the Operations Directorate. So I think that's Glyn Barton, our Chief Operating Officer. I'm going to hand over to Glyn.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, a variety of things in the operations function. I think it's worth noting that over previous years we've made considerable savings in this area, re-examining our service levels and making efficiencies in the way that we undertake our work. I think it's also worth pointing out that the area generates considerable revenue and we've sought to maintain this position and ensure that we're providing residents with a good service where they're directly paying for it. So this budget provides a balance of both charge changes and efficiencies. So just going down the list, in our commercial area, we're protecting our cultural assets, which are enjoyed by residents across the conurbation. We've seen a growth in our leisure offers, with residents seeing the investment that's been made into our leisure service. And we're setting fees here in line with this and other operators' offers. Across our parking, we'll see an increase by an average of 4%, and we're looking at efficiencies in how we enforce that. And then across our entertainment and catering, we're aligning our fees and charges in line with both the demand and the performance of the variety of offers within that portfolio. Our environment function continues to operate at service levels that were set in 24-25, and we're not seeking to address these in this budget, so residents will not see a change in service here. But we are absorbing new functions like increased food recycling collections. Our planning and transport teams continue to seek grants and maximise the funding available. We've consulted on the bus subsidy, and that's been through Cabinet and is on its way to Council. We'll review our charges, particularly in the planning area, to ensure they're both fair and appropriate and aligned nationally. And then in our customer and property area, we're looking to work more efficiently, maintaining and managing our assets, and particularly in our customer service area, where we're looking to embrace new technology and streamline our call management functions. I think across all of the services, I would say that we continue to have a spend freeze, particularly on non-essential expenditure, and this is building a bit of a non-safety related maintenance backlog, which services are looking at the implications of. I think this is likely where we'll see residents seeing impacts on streets, but we have seen, I think, some successful strategies to mitigate that, such as our plan for play, which is an example of how we're taking a more strategic view of how to address this maintenance backlog and invest in those functions.
Thank you very much, Glyn. I think I open up to questions from the board on the Operations Directorate. Councillor Canavan.
Thank you, Chair. My questions are all on this first block of commercial operations which have COS references, and there's this word used, I think, 3 times, rebalance, and I'm just wondering if somebody could explain to me what that actually means. But my other quick question as well, I should know this, but I can't remember. The reduction in the grant contribution to the Arts by the Sea Festival is £150,000. I think my memory serves me right that we got notice of this previously, that this was coming forward, but what I can't remember is that whether that reduces the entire funding from BCP to that festival, or whether there is any remaining monies that we are helping to support that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
happy
yeah,
to go ahead?
yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Canavan. So, on the rebalancing item, so COS4, rebalance of events and business support functions, that is that was a restructure of the events team, which has already taken place, and this is effectively getting the full year impact of that saving. The next one, rebalance of heritage teams to support efficiencies across the operational areas, so that's COS 9. I think we've got some fantastic heritage assets across the conurbation. It's really important that we manage those in a most efficient way possible. We are having some resource struggles in those areas, and this is effectively looking at how we utilise the teams that we have in place in the most efficient way possible. And then COS 10, which is the rebalance of the visitor service. This was looking at the Tourist Information Centre peer approach in Bournemouth. We are looking at how best to utilise that space. We had a planning application in. We're just taking a step back and re-evaluating our plans there presently, but we still believe that the saving is achievable. So that's the rebalancing elements. And then on Arts by the Sea, we have had funding confirmation from Arts Council England, and we're looking to match that funding through sponsorship and other routes. But I noticed that Councillor Martin, because he's very passionate about this, is at the table. So I wondered if he wanted to add anything.
Yeah, thank you, Glyn. Okay,
Go ahead, Councillor Martin, yes.
Just as a reminder of the context, so the funding for the Arts by our cash funding, which is I think the 150,000 that's referred to, was always due to end after 3 years anyway, and obviously because of the financial constraints of that we found ourselves in the last 3 years, that was not we were not able to renew that. However, we have put in as I think everybody will know, we put in a successful bid to Arts Council England for the 2026 extension year, but that's not cash. It's essentially our match funding is relating to the time and the salaries of our cultural development team, and a little bit of, I think, a little bit of money that wasn't spent, say 30,000. So just to confirm that the Arts by the Sea Festival will go ahead in 2026 with our contribution and a significant amount of money. I'm not sure it's in the public domain yet, but a significant amount of money from Arts Council England. And we have also agreed in principle to proceed with a potential bid for Arts by the bid to Arts Council England for Arts by the Sea 2027. Hope that helps.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, I've had Councillor Beasley. Yeah, and then okay. Councillor Beasley.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just before I ask my questions, just to be clear, I sit on the South West Council for the Arts Council on behalf of Bournemouth. I've had nothing to do with any of the applications that Councillor Martin's talking about, and that isn't part of the role anyway, but I wanted to make that quite clear. So in terms of this part of the budget papers, I've got three questions. They're all around CA and P, and they are items S4, S6 and S8. And I just wondered whether, first of all, on S4, business support staff reductions of £140,000, could we hear a little bit more about what that means and what that entails, please? And which part of the service that is going to affect. The second is S6, and it's a review of the FM team producing savings of £50,000. Similar question to the first one. And thirdly, S8, which is the infrastructure review to achieve savings of £100,000. Could we have an explanation as to what that actually means? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are you clear about where those are? 'Cause I'm-
Yeah, I think you can point me in the right direction if I've missed them. But so S4, the business support staff reduction. So this is looking across both our internal support for officers in the council, but also our customer services, making sure that we're harnessing the technology that Sarah's team is providing and the efficiencies around that. And rebalancing how we undertake our telephony service. So there's efficiencies to be found in that area. Obviously, we will be doing that with a keen eye on customer service and the time taken to answer and resolve calls. Then COS 6, which was the review of facilities management team. This is a saving that's come about due to the age of the team and us looking at how we best use the resource that is left as a result of some retirements and effectively rebalancing duties within the team to make a saving there. And then S8, which is the service efficiency infrastructure review. There is, I believe, an efficiency to be found in the services and the way that they procure, and particularly clients, a lot of the engineering work. And it's an efficiency that we'll find in the way that we client the engineering work that I'm working with the service directors on.
So, Chair, just to be clear, the infrastructure review is mainly about procurement.
It's about how we procure our consultancy services, the client briefs, etc. And there's a lot of backwards and forwards in the way that we do that. It's the efficiency that we can take out from that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Aikenhead.
Yes, there is an item on page 103, COS 6, reduction in pay and display machines across BCP. So I know that in the past this committee have just expressed some concern about the fact that some people don't have smartphones. So I just wanted to ask, is this just not replacing machines that are broken, or are we actually stopping using some that are working? And if we are stopping using some that are working, how many? And will there still be some machines that people can use if they don't have a smartphone?
Thank you. And I think throughout this process of looking at how we manage our parking charges, particularly the introduction of our single supplier Ringo and how that's rolling out, we've been very conscious that there are people in the conurbation that use cash. I think it's worth just reminding ourselves that the cash handling fee for every pound that we take, we lose 31 pence of that when we handle the cash. So there are efficiency benefits, but obviously we acknowledge that not everyone has access to a smartphone. There will still be regular access to parking machines across the conurbation. People will be able to find them in car parks or on streets. But as machines break down, etc., we'll be looking to bag them over as a result of this in a sustained way, or reallocate working machines if we don't have the distribution of parking machines in the right place.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else had a question on any of the items under operations? I just wanted to ask, and apologies if I missed you covering this, Glyn, but the one above that, the one below that, COS 7 on page 103, parking operational changes, because that's quite a large number, that 610,000. So just have a little bit more on what that refers to.
Yeah, so there's the three main increases in the parking fees. So we had a baseline 2% increase in income that was assumed in the MTFP. The assumption is that on average we'd increase parking fees across the conurbation by 4% next year. So that's an extra 2%, which brings in the extra income that we see in COS 16. And then alongside that in COS 7, I'm just getting my COSs right here. In COS 7, what we're looking at is there are efficiencies in how we enforce those parking charges, and there's a review of how best we undertake our permits, etc. as part of that.
Okay, so
To be looked at and consulted upon, obviously.
is that linking into the parking strategy?
It
Which
is.
I know that it's coming to this board
Yeah,
quite soon as well. So okay, and that's obviously your considered opinion on the savings that can be realised through that. Thank you very much. That's helpful. Okay, are there any further questions on this section? It doesn't look like it. So thank you very much, Glyn, and we'll move on then to I think the last section we have, which is the resources directorate, which I think is Aidan going to talk us through.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening. Just to set the scene then on resources, and in the context of the question, how does it impact on our residents? So resources, our role is predominantly to support the council to enable the directorates to do their good services to the residents that we've heard. So resources is made up of legal, marketing, communications, democratic services, people and culture, climate, finance, IT and programmes. The majority of the expenditure, the majority of the budget goes on staffing, and so it's majority staffing, a little the rest on contracts. In terms of the savings we've got in front of you, just around about £1 million savings target for next year. The savings are achieved, we've got sort of line by line, they're fairly small individual items totaling up to £1 million, but it's about efficiency, so it's about retendering of contracts. We've got some in there about turning our systems off, which is quite helpful. There's a bit of savings, 300,000 there in terms of reduction of posts, and that comes back to the staffing approach. So Glyn mentioned earlier about the vacancy freeze that we've already got in place. And one of the things that the Resources Directorate has done this year is by really pushing hard on that vacancy freeze to generate an underspend to offset the rest, or to partially offset some of the challenge that the rest of the organisation is facing. So given that our role is to support the organisation itself, there's very little, if anything, in here that residents should notice the impact of. It's about being more efficient as an organisation, which I think is something we're really, really keen on. It's about being more productive, but I'm happy to go into the detail, colleagues are as well. I don't think that a resident should notice. If we get it right, residents shouldn't notice.
Thank you very much, Aidan. If I can just ask one question that came to me when I looked at this. I appreciate what you say about these savings being less frontline, front-facing kind of things. The one that stood out to me was FS3 under the finance section. The first, increased levels of insurance self-funding, vehicles and unoccupied properties. And I wanted to just understand that slightly more. It's a relatively big number compared to any of the other single lines. And I also, it may not be related, but back when I first became a councillor, or before I first became a councillor, there was an incident in one of the local parks in Moordown where a piece of play equipment was vandalised, and we ascertained that it couldn't be replaced because it was, we were told it had been self-insured. I think that was the phrasing that was used, and what that turned out to mean was that it wasn't insured. So there wasn't any money to replace it. So that line is making me worry about particularly, about what that really means. So.
So if I can just come in there, Chair, with
Yeah.
regards to that particular saving, just as a reminder, that is a saving that's already been agreed by Council as part of the pay and reward report that went forward to Council in July last year. So this is one that's already been agreed, but it's in here for completeness because clearly that cost and those savings need to be reflected in the budget as being presented. Generally, what we've been doing with our insurance broker is just trying to look from that tipping point when it comes to self-insurance and the amount that we then spend by way of any costs that we potentially have to incur, because with all of these insurance arrangements, there's an excess, and it's just trying to determine what level of excess do you take on, and is it better to just self-insure up until that point, or to get the broker and insurance company to take on all of that amount? So that saving reflects that conversation that's happened with our brokers with regards to vehicles and unoccupied properties.
Okay, so if I understand, it's things that for which the calculation has been done that actually it wouldn't make sense to insure because of the.
Yeah, what we've done
is
is, because we're going to do some more, if you like, self-insurance, then part of that savings then been passed across to various units, but predominantly operations, to cover the fact that there's likely to be more bills because they're going to have to cover the excess. So it's just about getting the right balance.
Okay, thank you. Were there any other questions on this section that people had for Aidan? Not seeing any indications, but thank you very much for taking us through that as well. And I think, as you said, this one is perhaps the one with the least obvious direct impact on residents and the focus of this section. So, well, thank you all very much, all the officers very much for taking us through that as we requested. There was one other question which I think we wanted to pose at the same time around. We've talked through the savings and that's really good, but the other aspect is the fact that we will have in place, as set out in this budget paper, the proposed continuation of spending freezes, and so whether or not there was any anticipated impact aside from the specific savings lines on that approach that we understand, is probably a necessity, but whether there's any anticipated impact from that side of things as well. Yes.
So yes, great. If I could comment on that. So we've made it clear in the report that the current vacancy freeze we've got at the moment and non-essential spend freeze, we weighed up whether we should continue with that or not. We decided we need to continue, not least because you can see later on in the year after next, we've got a budget gap, and the year after that, there's another budget gap as well. So £30 million is the gap in 2 years' time. It was detailed in the papers. So by maintaining the vacancy freeze and getting stricter about it, we wanted to start to kind of manage the pay bill opportunistically. So as staff choose to leave, sort of retire, get another job, what have you, the default is that we don't replace them. And what we do is we ask very sort of relentlessly, very challenging questions about, can the work be spread among other colleagues? Can the work be stopped? Or can the work be undertaken by rearranging things and using the technology that we've invested so heavily in over recent years? So what we want to do is ask those questions systematically, and we will, and it's inevitable that we will do some recruitment. We're not saying that we're not replacing staff, because there are certain roles within this council where you definitely need people. What I really want to do is sort of push hard that, challenge ourselves to be efficient, more and more efficient, as I was describing. So in terms of your question, we haven't built in any savings as a consequence of that yet, because we're using the approach at the moment for this current financial year to try and contain some of the overspend this financial year. So it's about dealing with today's problem rather than tomorrow's problem. But I think by becoming more systematic about it, firmer about it, it'll kind of give us that sense of, as we go through the remainder of the year, could we build in a savings target in future years? The reality is, though, that we, having gone through pay and reward and the new pay and reward contracts that our colleagues are now on, we do know that there will be some pay pressures as a consequence of that. And those pay pressures have got to be funded from somewhere. And it's highly likely they'll be funded through sort of vacancies that are held. So it's with a combination of those two reasons that we haven't built any numbers in yet. But I think it's an essential approach to sort of try and maintain, sort of live within our means.
Okay, thank you very much. So we will move on now to taking the report as a whole, and we'll hear, I think, from Councillor Cox and from Adam, and we also have a leader here as well. I don't know if you're going to present or just come in later on, but I'll hand over to you to present the overall paper and move on from there. Councillor Cox.
Can I just start? Thank you very much. Can I just start by saying, and this is probably going to be the first of many, that this is probably going to be the last overview and scrutiny meeting of a certain council officer, and I think I would like to start by paying tribute to the work that he has put into this, and him and his team, because it's not without his diligence, his forbearance of many councillors and other officers, that we are in the good situation we are at the moment. I know sometimes it doesn't feel good, but it's a lot better than it would have been otherwise. I think 40... I'm sure he'll get a few of these other embarrassments as the days go by, but that was just my little starter. I think if I just remind you as to what we went through last year, and last year we had a balanced budget, not just for the coming year, but also for the next 3 years as well. And that was despite the fact that we had about an £11+ million hit because of national insurance, but also another hit because of the national living wage, for which we'd never got compensated, despite assurances we would do. So last year we set sail on a good project, but this year we always kind of realised that it was not going to be good from all the whispers that we were hearing, and I think I've said on a number of occasions that I was expecting it to be a bit brutal, and all I can say is the settlement that we have got is beyond brutal, insofar as the cash that we were getting in future is reducing year by year by year. So much so that even you take account of inflation, we will be £15 million a year worse off because of the settlement we've had, this so-called fair funding settlement. And so, you know, we were faced with a really, really difficult situation. In addition to that, of course, we were also faced with an increasing SEND deficit. We are projecting the SEND deficit to be £184 million by the end of this year. And at the end of March 2028, we were expecting it to be not short of effectively 400 million, which was just going to dwarf any kind of reserves we had, and would have lent us to actually have to borrow or pay interest on borrowings of another £20 million. So it's no surprise when you see the papers in front of you, where we're faced with a £30 million hole in the budget in 3 years' time. In fact, it's probably quite remarkable that it's only £30 million. It really should be a lot more. However, you've obviously all had the papers in front of you. You've seen that we've balanced the budget for next year, although it's £30 million for the 2 years after that. And we've only managed to do that, despite all our best efforts, by taking £4.6 million from reserves, something that I was dead against all the way through, because I felt as though with the risks that we have, we should be building up our reserves and not taking money from the reserves. But it was either that or taking some really, really brutal decisions, and we felt as though we couldn't do that at this time. However, today has been a bit of a roller coaster, to say the least, in terms of announcements from government. And as you've all been made aware, and it's not been a secret, we've applied for extra financial support from government in 2 ways. One, to increase the council tax by more than 4.99%, by an extra 2.43 on top of that, to take account of the fact that we effectively gave up the increases in 3 years ago. And also on top of that, it was an either or situation, or we either did £10 million or £21 million in total over 2 years of capitalised sales on the sale of capital assets, and took that against the send interest. We've actually been successful. I'm sure people may not describe that as a success, but we have been successful insofar as the government have allowed us an increase in council tax over and above 4.99%, not to the amount that we've asked for, but they've allowed us to increase council tax by 1.75%, which gives us approximately £5 and a bit million extra a year. That's as far as I'm concerned, that's welcome. That will put the council on a much more sustainable footing in the future. It's still only £5 million. It is actually the smallest increase that the government have allowed of all the councils that have got it, and frankly, I'll be recommending that we do take advantage of that. In addition to that increase, however, the government have also, and I have to pay tribute to the Labour government for this, because there's a lot of people who've been sceptical, including myself, that they would grasp the nettle of send, and they seem to have grasped the nettle of send and said that they will repay us 90% of the debt at the end of March 26. So at the end of March 26, we will get effectively 90% of that debt, and that's quite a significant amount of money. And that will enable us to not pay the interest. However, we're not going to get that money. They're not actually going to give us the cheque probably until the last quarter of that year. So we want to actually save that money in interest next year. We may say, it depends when we get it. If we get it on the 1st of January, which we're expecting, then it might be about £1.5 million, something like that. So it might be a little bit, but it won't be an awful lot. Technically, the saving will happen the year after. However, you will remember, according in your papers, that we are expecting the send deficit to continue to rise, and it will rise in the year after and in the year after that. Now, we have assumed in all the papers that we've received today that offer of 90% will be replicated in March 2028, i.e. that we will get another 90% write-off of any debt. That's kind of what we're assuming. That's the only thing we can assume at the moment, which will be another huge sum of money. We will still obviously have to pay some interest in that period. On the continuing send deficits, i.e. the 10% that we didn't get written off in March 26, and the accumulated send deficits in the next 2 years. At the end of March 2028, however, and this is where that all seems like fantastic news, and we were actually on a high at this stage. This is where the roller coaster goes swimmingly downhill from there on in. There is a little clause in there which says that the statutory override, which allows us to maintain that negative reserve on our balance sheet, will be dispensed with. It will be got rid of. So from then on in, 10% of that debt will be ours. And if I would just remind you of the figures, that will approximate to about £38 million at the end of March 2028, which will be our responsibility. If you add that to our reserves now, we're insolvent, because our reserves at the moment are estimated to be approximately 28 to 29 million. So we're in a difficult situation. We were hoping to have some good news, and to be honest, as an accountant, I have to say, this is really, really welcome news, because I've often described the send deficit debt system as being an abomination, from an accounting perspective. At least this is actually, going quite a long way to actually resolving that situation for local government. However, it will leave us in a very, very precarious situation financially. We have £30 million to find. We obviously won't be able to find it because we're going to have to put significant sums away for the next 2 years to build up our reserves to not just cover the £38 million that we will be left with, but also obviously maintain 5%, at least 5% in reserves in our unfunded. So that's the situation we find ourselves in today. Obviously, I'm very happy to take any questions, but I will let Adam go through the details of the budget we have before us. But I think that summarises where we are today in terms of what you have in front of you and what the results of today are. But Adam will correct me if I've got anything wrong.
Thank you. I'll hand straight on to Adam then.
Well, Chair, first of all, thank you for your kind words. But I'd also emphasise that I thought Mike did an absolutely brilliant job in explaining that situation with regards to what the announcement was today, and I think he was spot on with regards to all the numbers as well. So well done to Mike. With regards to the position today in the announcement, I would just issue a slight word of caution that the information came out at 3:30 today. There is an incredible amount of information, as there always is, and we've obviously picked up one bit of fine detail. We need to check all the fine detail to understand it, and clearly what we'll be doing as officers is doing that tomorrow, and then advising cabinet ready for their meeting on Wednesday with regards to the implications. Other than that, Chair, I think you've got the budget reports in front of you. Hopefully they set out the position as clearly as possible. I accept that there's an incredibly amount of information, but I'm quite happy to take any questions anybody has on any part of the report or any of the appendices. But at this stage, I'm going to pause and just see if the leader, would like to say anything in regards to introducing this budget.
Oh. Thank you, Mike and Adam. I think you've both done a really good job of explaining that. And I've actually been in a parliamentary inquiry this afternoon. So my phone was pinging away and I was trying to sort of half keep an eye on it. So I'm very grateful for you having explained it, because that is also the first time that I'm getting my head around it. I think what I would add to this is actually the huge sense of pride that as a cabinet we have in this position we're at today, and that might be surprising to hear, because my goodness, it's been very, very difficult to work our way through this budget situation, particularly following the provisional revenue settlement announcement, and the fact that it became very clear very quickly that Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole and the southwest have lost out massively to the northern areas of the country. And I'm not going to comment on the reasons behind that, but maybe I will do later, it depends. But the reality is it was quite a shock actually to see that we were going to be losing money from the revenue settlement. So we had to find a way to cope with that. Obviously, there are lots of things that we've considered as a cabinet. I'm really proud that we've been able to keep public toilets open, keep our beaches lifeguarded, and keep community safety officers in place. There's a lot here that I think we should be really clear were things we were not prepared to be cutting. And actually, when we look at it as what our communities would value, I think it's really clear that we want to retain those services. And I'm pleased we've got to this budget position of where we are, considering the national picture and actually the southern picture, the picture in the southwest. I don't think this is the end at all. In fact, I think it's going to be a very busy week ahead in terms of what we find out further from government once Adam and the team have had a chance to work their way through it. I think really I would just welcome Scrutiny's discussion and to look at this in a lot more detail as a budget as a whole. This is not an easy decision. None of us want to be raising council tax
above the 4.9. To be honest, none of us want to be raising council tax at all, considering the cost of living crisis that we face. But I think we need to be really mindful of what the alternative is. And that alternative is major cuts across services that residents depend upon and that they value. I think we're in a position now where we have made some decisions which were challenging and which, you know, people do lose out, but they are necessary to allow us to deliver a balanced budget. And we feel, you know, we've kind of met the government halfway at this point, in a lot of ways, that they are now stepping up and responding to our calls to deal with the deficit. So I won't add any more, but I will be answering questions, if that's right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I have Councillor Waite, and then I'll come to Councillor Tarling.
Thank you. So if you don't have the information on this at this stage, I don't want to kind of get stuck on it, but I am a little bit concerned about that wording that authorities will be eligible to apply for this grant subject to submitting and securing a local send reform plan, which sounds a little bit horribly familiar to the safety valve situation that we were in. Is it as bad as that, or is this actually like a realistic solution for us, if you can say at this stage?
Chair, I think in the report, I think in section 5, I provide details of the local SEND reform plan, and the work, you know, that we need to do to satisfy DFE, that we're taking, if you like, all means possible to us to try and contain the SEND expenditure and grab the grant by as little as possible. You know, clearly, you know, we've got that history, we've got that experience from the past, but we will certainly be trying to do our best to make sure that we meet those requirements and achieve, you know, the successful inward investment that comes from meeting that grant.
Councillor Burton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And funny enough, actually, I only just copied and pasted that exact same phrase from the document to help me understand it. And I was going to bring that up in this meeting if I've got the chance. There is differences. Again, it's too early to understand, but one thing it does say here, we expect local send reform plans to be developed collaboratively by local area partnerships, including schools, health, early year settings, post-16. So it does look slightly different. So yes, that is something which highlighted me, because of course it is sort of, it could be, if you looked at things like that, it could be a get out clause, couldn't it? To say, well, I'm sorry, you didn't do what we asked you to do, therefore you don't get it. But
I just think that people are going to be really worried about it. So I think the sooner we can get some more clarity, the better it is for people, isn't it?
yeah, I would agree, but I would say it's only hours since it's landed in.
Yeah, Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, I've got to declare an interest. The Prime Minister was in Hastings talking about Pride in Place, and I have a long connection with Hastings. So, but what I'm very proud of, Councillor Earl just made a point, and Hastings, I think, was one of the few areas that did get a boost in money. There were some places in the south that got it, but I really do think that you know, us as a council, we've done a great thing, and I'll just reiterate what Councillor Cox said about the good work that's been done, I think, by all officers, and just echo that. My question, again, to the point as quickly as possible, is the sums that were all the figures just thrown out by Councillor Cox there. It looks like there's going to be at the end of 28 a £9 million shortfall. Is that correct? In reserves, if we had to replace the shortfall on the override, is that the plan? And will we be working on a plan to then somehow boost our reserves by 9 million in 2 years? Because that sounds like quite a thing to do.
It's I wish it was only 9 million. It will be significantly more than that in reality. We don't know the exact figure because we haven't crunched the numbers yet. But Adam looks as though he's desperate to tell me what the figures.
Well, I think, you know, in the budget report and the presentation I gave last week, I highlighted that our current estimate before today's announcement was that DSG deficit would amount to £380 million on the 31st of March 2028. Now, if you assume that locally, we have to deal with a 10% residual amount of that funding, that means by the 31st of March 2028, we need a strategy to be developed as to how we're going to generate £38 million in reserves.
Thank you. Councillor Aikenhead, you wanted to ask something?
Yes, I've got 3 questions on different topics, and not to do with the new information, but to do with things already in the budget. So the first one is, if you look at the actual recommendations for the budget, you've got A, lots of things, B, C. So I'm right at the page 4. C says delegate to the chief executive in consultation with the director of finance, leader and portfolio holder for finance, the allocation of any additional resources that become available through the final local government finance settlement or any other means. So I kind of think maybe we're not expecting any other huge amounts to come through, but that does seem quite wide, and I was just wondering if it was possible for us to actually put in the report what we think, if there was any extra money, what we think should happen to it, rather than leaving it quite that open. That's my first question.
Adam.
Chair, my expectation is, because of the fact that we received that final settlement today, with some significant changes as outlined by the leader and the deputy leader, my anticipation is that when we get to Cabinet on Wednesday, there will be what I refer to as a budget addendum. And that budget addendum will set out what those additional resources, what those changes mean, and look to revise the recommendations that are currently in this report in reflection of what's set out by government earlier today.
So that means you won't need C to be in there for full council.
Correct.
Thank you. My second question is, last year we discussed the resident card in the budget setting, and I was just looking, because we said last year we're not doing it, but maybe we'll do it next year. So I was just looking for where it was in the budget, and I can't find it anywhere. So I wondered, is it still happening? And if so, where is it in the budget?
Who would like to answer that?
It's definitely happening. I'll actually get Glenn to answer it, and we believe the cost of it is in operations.
Glenn.
Yeah, so there's 96k in the base budget for it, and then we've got a proportion of the UK SPFF funding for it, so it's still happening and it's funded.
And I think Councillor Aikenhead was asking where she would find it. Are you able to point to it in our papers?
I'm not sure exactly what page it's
No.
in that, but we can
Okay,
certainly
if you
find
can
it for you.
look,
But it will be within your,
It's in my
basically within your, it's within the operations directorate,
budget, yeah.
and it's a one-off, and it's basically a one-off cost.
Yeah, that 96k plus
That's
the
the one-off
UK
cost.
SPF element as well.
It's not in the capital expenditure bit,
No.
so I looked through there. So is it just like, so does that mean that's something that's within your budget, and next year that will be a savings because it won't be in your budget anymore?
We need to work it out and see how the scheme lands and what the scheme's actually doing, and how much income it's bringing in, how much it's costing, etc. Which I think is what we said in the paper that we brought forward on the residence card.
And if we decided not to do it, that would be a saving.
A very small one, yeah, potentially.
Just checking.
Leader, did you want to come in?
So it wouldn't necessarily be a saving based on like a revenue saving. It would be a saving on the UK SPF amount that's allocated to it. So it would still have to be spent within the UK SPF terms. So it's not shouldn't really be seen as a revenue cost in the base budget, because it's not. It's as being spent from the grant.
Grant. Okay. Okay. My third question is, last question. can you just give a brief overview of how the results of the consultation relate to the decisions that have been made for the budget?
So the budget consultation is always quite broad, and I'm sure councillors, when they looked at things like the questions asking, would you prefer us not to raise council tax? You know, the responses can sometimes be quite obvious. What I would say though is we've taken this again. Consultation is a big part of how we make decisions, but we've worked it in as well alongside both political priorities. Also recommendations from Scrutiny. So for example, Scrutiny made a very clear recommendation about the culture budget. We've also taken into account various elements of the budget that are already in place and how we could perhaps be a bit more efficient with some of that spend. And in the end, I think we've got a position where we can kind of balance the needs of the community and what came out in the consultation alongside what we've got, but we've taken into account such a broad range of other things as well. I think it was really useful to have the two consultations. So, you know, the one where we look specifically at a set of representative people, and then one which is a bit broader. And actually, I think it's the comparison between the two which makes it really interesting. But yeah, at this point, as much as we can't, and we're not proposing to honour some of those questions around would you like us never to raise council tax again, I think when it comes to those priorities, we've been able to do that, because what this budget does is it really prioritises things like protecting our most vulnerable, making sure that our statutory services, you know, services for children, for adults, are really protected, and I think that's really what was reflected in the consultation. Thanks.
Okay. I'd actually like to make a suggestion in terms of when we do the budget consultation next year, that maybe we should think about the questions that we're asking and no longer ask obvious questions. So for instance, if we know we have to raise the council tax, let's not ask whether we should be raising it or not. Maybe you could ask something like, would you prefer that we raise the council tax and keep the services, or would you prefer that we don't raise the council tax and we cut the services? Because that's an actual choice that we could make. So asking people things that represent real choices. This time we asked a question about which of the following services would you like to see improved? Unless we're in a position to make enough improvement for people to notice improvement, that's quite a misleading question. And maybe what we should be asking, if we're in a position of looking at cuts, is if we were going to cut any of these services, which ones would you really not want us to cut? So that you're asking people real questions rather than asking something that you can use but you can't use quite as well. So I would like to suggest that is taken on board for next year, to make sure that the questions in the budget consultation are more real. I like the fact that you asked sample as well as a full survey. That was very good good practice. But let's make the questions count. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Aikenhead. So there was a recommendation there. Did you want to put that forward for a
Yes,
for us
I
to
would
make a
like
decision
to.
on?
I don't know about what wording, because I think I waffled a bit on the wording there.
Claire, how do
Do
you feel?
do you want to think around that?
the board recommends reviewing the questions asked in the budget consultation to make sure that they are relevant to the actual choices that need to be made within the budget setting.
Yeah, for the next
yeah.
budget setting
Yep.
process, something around the time frame. Yeah.
I need a second.
Yeah, I think is someone prepared to second Councillor Aikenhead's proposal? There we go, Councillor Macro, thank you. Yeah, does anyone want to comment on that recommendation? Councillor Earl.
I think we'd be very happy to accept that. I think it's just with the caveat of I never quite know what we legally have to ask with the changes that we're making, obviously around the principles. I did just want to mention two things. Councillor Waite was just indicating about Dorset's consultation this year. They had like a sliding scale, so people were actually having to put their own budget together, which I thought was a really creative way of doing it. The other thing I want to mention is participatory budgeting, which I recently had a really good session as part of the Town Centre Citizens panel that Jessica Toll MP and I have been doing, and it gave us some time and space to actually talk more around the context in which we're operating in local government and explain more about the services that we do. And I do think that often we go for breadth in consultation rather than actually looking at it in depth and really getting residents together to look at it with a bit more information in the background and understanding what's going on. So I would love to do more consultation and more quality consultation as well. So I'm very happy to take that away, and for next year we'll look at some better ways in which we can do it.
Thank you. All right then, could we just see a show of hands around that recommendation, that all those in favour of putting that forward to the Cabinet for next year? That is unanimous. Yeah, that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, so do we have any more members wanting to ask any questions on the budget paper, or Councillor Walters?
So recently we've had a number of local MPs mentioning that the settlement leaves us a lot better off. And obviously from what you've said today, that doesn't seem to be the case. Can you maybe tell us what the reason is between the discrepancy between what they understand and what you understand?
Yeah, I'm quite happy. But effectively, what the government, to be fair, and parroted by certain MPs, have said is talked about the increase that the councils will be able to spend in 4 years' time, and that includes the year just gone, and the increase in spend, and that includes increasing council tax by 4.99% every year for the next 4 years. So it does seem like a big figure when you add it all up together, so that's the reason why we're being. Or the public is being fed the information that it's we're getting millions of pounds more, where in actual fact we're getting less.
Leader.
Thank you. I've got in front of me my favourite table, which I've been showing everyone the last couple of weeks, which is some work that Key Cities have done for us. So Key Cities is one of our was one of our networks. And they looked particularly at similar places to us, so similar size sort of towns, cities, conurbations that operate the same level of service. And what they did was they broke it down. So you've got core spending power, which is what the government are saying they have delivered for local authorities, which is basically permission or to raise by 4.99% every year. But then the second table that they have is what it looks like then if you take away the council tax requirement, and it's a completely different picture. So just to give you an example, BCP Council, we're going to be losing 3.81% over those 3 years. So in 3 years' time, we will be 4% worse off from our revenue settlement. It's not as bad as Bath. They're down 15.9% over that time. I also just want to have sympathy for Councillor Waite as Chair of Fire Authority. She and fire service will be losing 20% of their funding from their revenue grant settlement over that time. Now, just to contrast that to some other councils, we've got, for example, Southampton, which will actually be raising, so this isn't including council tax, they will be getting 23% more in their revenue settlement. Wolverhampton will be getting 26% more. Medway will be getting 24% more. And various other councils across the area, across the key cities network, will be getting more. It's only 4 of us which lose out, which is Bath, Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, Cumberland and Sunderland. So that is all after we take out council tax. So, you know, I obviously get a lot of residents write to me about council tax rises, not necessarily above the additional 4.99%, but actually because of that 4.99%. And I'm having to go back to them now and say, actually, you know, this is austerity 2.0 for places like Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. And regardless of the reasons that the government are doing that, I know that they have this will to redistribute and address regional inequalities. We're now in a situation where for residents of Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, it's a very different picture from where it was under the previous government.
Thank you, Councillor Rowell. Okay, do I have any other questions or comments from any members of the board? I had something I'd like to ask, if that's all right. It is about, it's coming back to something we talked about right at the beginning around the recommendation that this board put forward in October, when we looked at some of the budget areas in some detail through our budget conversations. One of those was, and also we looked at the library strategy, and we did a bit of a dive through those 2 things into what was going on with the libraries. And we, as a board, we wanted to suggest that it came from the discussion on libraries. The actual recommendation was wider. It was around looking at if there was any possibility of using of investing at all in our publicly facing assets, things like our library buildings, and using the capital receipts that we get from the asset disposal. Now, in the budget papers, we've got a section about the asset disposal and the capital receipts that we've been getting year on year, and that shows us that we've got quite consistently over the next few years forecasting to each, at the end of each financial year, to have a sort of 10 to 12 million pound amount to carry forward. And I understand that the intention is to use that for transformation and invest to save projects, and I also understand from, I think it's page 33 in the report, that the position that's given in the report around why we couldn't use any of that money for things like maintaining and repairing our library buildings was around uncertainty around the support for the DSG deficit. Now I know that we've still got a lot of detail to be worked through there, but we have a huge shift has happened in that today, so we have a lot less uncertainty around that. And I just wanted to really understand, so in the context of, and it was touched on again earlier, the Charminster Library has closed and has been closed now for, I don't know, a couple of months, and is going to be closed for a while longer because the ceiling fell down. And we have already identified through the library strategy that there's about £1.8 million worth of repairs needed to our library estate, and about a quarter of that is Charminster Library actually. And if we don't do those things, then more of our library ceilings are going to fall down and our libraries are going to close. And to me, it's put that into really stark relief that we should be looking at this. We've said in our library strategy how important it is to keep our library service where it is, but we can't do that if the ceilings fall down and we have to close the buildings. So I do want to ask if we can't look again, when we've got £10 million rolling forward each year from that asset disposal programme, why can't we look again at that 1.8 million bill that's been identified for across our library estate, at addressing that to prevent actually what service cuts, because when the library's closed, that service is gone. Yeah, Adam.
Chair, if I maybe come in and suggest a response. First of all, Appendix 6, it talks about the flexible use of capital receipts. The first thing to highlight is that there are assumptions in there with regards to the generation of capital receipts. And as we've seen, selling any asset is incredibly difficult because actually, there are always opposing views around some of those assets. And I am always slightly shocked sometimes as to length some people will go to stop assets being sold. And I won't go into any further detail. However, that is not the main reason, accepting that level of uncertainty. The level of uncertainty within the report is around we might need a capitalisation direction. And I think what we've heard today is we've been set a challenge of identifying reserves to the equivalent of £38 million, and we've got 2 years from a standing start as to where we're going to find those £38 million. My suggestion, as your Chief Financial Officer, would be to explore the possibility with government of a capitalisation direction which enable you to sell those assets and turn that capital into revenue in order to provide that capital receipt. That might be a way of getting that £30 million, which is far less impactful on our community than actually putting, if you like, that amount of money within the revenue budget over the next 2 years and taking those difficult, painful, brutal decisions that will be needed in order to balance those budgets. So that would be my recommendation, is to consider it for capitalisation direction before you consider it for anything else.
Thank you. Councillor Canavan.
Just to support what Adam's just said, I mean, I absolutely understand, Chair, why you are phrasing that in the context of libraries, because we have discussed that before. But I think you need to see it in the overall situation of our capital asset management strategy. And if you recall, when we were looking at the items for scrutiny recently, Councillor Cox actually suggested an item for scrutiny, which was about our asset management strategy. So I think that within that work that we might well be doing as part of our scrutiny, we could build into it the point that Adam has just raised. Because if we are thinking or even contemplating, trying to identify £30 million worth of, savings, for the want of a better word, then, we're almost certainly going to be looking at the sale of assets. But it's about how we manage those effectively, what we do with them, and what we use that money for when we raise that capital. So I think it's part and parcel of that piece of work that we've already kind of touched on already, and I just think it's something that we would need to do.
Oh, thank you. My question was really around the figures that are in the budget paper and the rolling forward of that £10 to £12 million each year going forward to the end of the period where we can do that flexible use of capital receipts, and why that couldn't a portion of that, a small portion of that, couldn't be put towards maintaining buildings which are clearly, it's not just be nice if the roof didn't leak a bit. Our services are failing because we're not investing in them. So that was a specific question really, but I will leave it there. Did anyone else have anything they wanted to ask around the budget? Councillor Beasley.
Well, the only comment I wanted to make was to be supportive of what Councillor Canavan has been speaking on only a moment ago, and which Councillor Cox introduced much earlier in this meeting. I do think we need to have a process that is completely open and transparent, because my experience has been in the past, over some time, that it hasn't always been as open and transparent and engaging of all members as it needs to be. And if it does achieve those outcomes, then it's far more likely to be successful, I would suggest. And at a time when we're facing the kind of challenges that we are with BCP Council, we need to have that underlying consent of members to make it happen. and that hasn't been the case in my experience over recent times, going back a few years. And I think if we can achieve that, that would be a great step forward, and it's certainly one that I would support and endorse.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments on the budget paper? Okay, well, we have some recommendations, obviously, in the report. We put forward a recommendation about the process. Was there anything else anyone wanted to bring forward? Did we? I'm not getting the sense of anyone particularly keen to make any further recommendations, but just double checking before we call that to a close. Okay, in that case, I thank you all very much. Thank you to Adam, and I will echo the words that Councillor Cox started us with around, if this is your last overview and scrutiny board meeting, Adam, then thank you hugely for all your support of the board, you know, over all the years that I've been on it and before that, and you know, you will be greatly missed. And goodness knows how anyone's going to fill those shoes, to be honest. But yeah, so thank you very much, and thank you everybody else for coming along and for giving us so much detail on all those elements that we asked you for. And we have one item left on our agenda, but if you don't want to stay and listen to us talk about our work plan, then you're very welcome to leave it there. Thank you so much.
Oh, not too bad.
I don't think there's something much to say on the
No,
work
I
plan,
know.
is there?
And I'm not proposing we take a break. I just
it would just be what we're doing next meeting, and that's when
yep,
confirming what we're doing next meeting, I think. And people can see that on the if you can find it. Where is it?
so we'll just allow the officers and cabinet members to leave the room. We just have one item left on our agenda. If I could just ask the board to bear with the next few minutes, we really don't have much left to do.
Okay, I think they're gone. That's good.
Yes.
I think you should just start.
Okay, so then our final item then is item 8, which is our work plan, and there isn't a huge amount to say on this, but you should all have the work plan in front of you in your papers. And our next meeting on the 23rd of February and 23rd of March we have items selected. I don't think there's been any change to those since our last meeting. But if anyone did want to raise anything or ask anything about what's coming up, so in February, 23rd of February, we have a pre-cabinet report on increased penalty charge notices and associated charges trial. That was the trial over the summer of the higher penalties for poor parking in along the seafront. We also have the report back from the consultation working group, which has been being developed for quite a long time, so that should be good. And we have the statutory crime and disorder scrutiny of the Community Safety Partnership. That's our next agenda. Did anyone have anything they needed to mention on those things? And then we've got a strong focus on parking in March with the parking strategy coming through, and also the feedback from the rapporteur work that's been done on parking enforcement around schools. Of course, we had our workshop, our work programming workshop a week ago, and just to say that the work is ongoing to kind of summarise the outcomes from that and probably bring those forward to the next meeting, late February meeting, to look at what's the outcomes of that workshop and agree our prioritisation and our work programme. Does anyone need to raise anything under that item, or are we happy to? Everyone seems content. Okay. No, Councillor Beasley, go ahead.
I'm not suggesting I'm not content, Chair, but I have a concern around the three issues of Carter's Quay, the BDC and the Winter Gardens, and other related regeneration. And what I'm concerned about is that, and I think I mentioned this at a meeting the other day, is that when we get up to probably about this time next year, we will not be in a position to scrutinise anything at all. We have 1 year left.
Yeah.
And I would hate to think that these issues go off over the horizon into the new council without them having come to us. They are of indeterminate dates at the moment. They did have dates on originally, and I fear that they are being pushed further and further away. I've raised it before, but I don't want it to be ignored.
No,
Thanks,
and
Chair.
I want to just reassure you, Councillor Beasley, that that's absolutely not the case. I agree with you, and as we said at our workshop last week, you know, I completely agree, we need to make sure that there is enough time between now and between when we look at them and the end of this term for meaningful, impactful work to be done. But that's so, when I referred to the work programming outputs coming through to the next meeting, I think that's when we will be able to see the proposal for how we build the regeneration stuff and everything else into our work programme that takes us up to May 2027. But absolutely have taken on that feedback from you on that topic. Thank you. Councillor Goodall.
May I just ask about the parking strategy and parking enforcement, particularly? Have we considered asking more bus to come in at the same time as the Director of Commercial Operations? Because there's the issue of parking when planning is taking place, and also park and ride. So I would have thought it would be useful to have them if it was possible.
Yes, that's a really good thought, and if Claire, can you make a note that we'll have a look at that for in preparation for that March meeting. Make sure we have, if we can possibly have somebody from Morbus there. It would be, I agree, it would be useful. Thank you. Any further points anyone wanted to raise? No. Okay. In that case, thank you all for your time and your input this evening, and I'll close the meeting.